Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be looking at SB4 GM organisms, genetically modified organisms, a 6-mark question walkthrough. Okay, so the question we're going to look at is to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the use of GM organisms. So the command word is discuss, talk about, describe the advantages and disadvantages. So I want you to talk about both of GM organisms. So quite an open question here. So what do we know about GM organisms? Let's think about it. So we've talked about insulin and bacteria, the treatment of diabetes. We could talk about golden rice, which contains beta carotene, which is important for vitamin A. We could also perhaps talk about crops that are herbicide resistant, so crops that can withstand weed killers. So these are all types of uses of GM organisms, so we could discuss. How could we use that in our answer? Now, what I would like you to do with advantages and disadvantages is actually to structure your question in the table. So we split our page here in half, and it helps us really make sure that we are discussing both the advantages and disadvantages of the GM organisms. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and have a go at answering that question. Okay, now what I'd like to do is go through how I would have answered this question. So exactly as I've just described, I would like you to do advantages and disadvantages. So I'd make 1 point on one side. So let's talk about insulin to start with. So bacteria can be genetically modified to produce insulin. This insulin can be used to treat diabetes, or type 1 diabetes to be specific. Now, the good thing about the table is that you can then talk about the comparative point, the disadvantage of this. So a disadvantage of the bacteria producing insulin is the insulin is not 100% or completely like human insulin. Even though we're using the human insulin gene, there are some slight differences because the bacteria produces it. So the insulin is not 100% like human insulin, which means it's not always suitable for everyone. So it doesn't work for some people. It doesn't affect people in the same way. Okay, let's talk about another advantage now. Okay, so we talked about the golden rice. So we can genetically modify rice to produce golden rice. Containing beta-carotene. To reduce vitamin A deficiencies. This is really important because in poorer countries where they might be vitamin A deficient, it can cause problems with the immune system and vision. So we can genetically modify rice to produce golden rice containing beta carotene to reduce vitamin A deficiency to improve vision, immune system issues. Okay, another advantage we can talk about in terms of crops and genetically modifying crops. We can genetically modify crops to be herbicide resistant. what that means is that we can spray the crop with a weed killer and the crop itself is not affected. So there's an issue here. There are concerns about genetically modified crops could crossbreed with other plants. Which might lead to herbicide resistant weeds. Producing super weeds that cannot be then affected by any weed killers. Okay, that's a 6-mark question, but I've got 1, 2, 3 advantages and 2 disadvantages. Now let's look at the mark scheme to see how this would have scored. Okay, now we're really interested in the level 3. How do we get 5 or 6 marks? You can have a look through this level 1 and level 2 in a moment, but to get a level 3 you need a detailed discussion including at least 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. Now we had 3 in my example advantages and 2 disadvantages, so we've met that point there. The answer communicates ideas clearly and coherently and uses scientific terminology. Okay, well we used words such as insulin, beta carotene, vitamin A. Okay, so we have met that criteria there as well. So the example I've just given you would fall into this category here and is likely to have scored 6 marks. Pause the video now and have a go at marking your own response. Okay, now I just want to quickly talk through a worked example that is another answer here. This is not written in a table, okay, but let's have a little look using the mark scheme how we would have scored this one. Okay, so if you want to pause the video now, you can have a go at marking this yourself, and then I'll talk it through with you. So pause the video now. Okay, so highlighting, we're talking about the advantages here. The advantage is that 2 genes can be inserted into a rice plant, becomes a golden one, produces high levels of beta carotene, high in vitamin A, which benefit vitamin A deficiency. Disadvantage is some people are worried that it will develop new allergies from eating GM crops. Okay, we didn't discuss that in the example that I did, but yeah, that's very important, that actually some of these genetically modified crops might lead to a new allergy. An advantage is that bacteria, so this is one advantage up here, and we've got a second advantage. Obviously down here we've got a disadvantage, our first disadvantage. Bacteria can be inserted with human insulin, produce bacteria that produces insulin. Disadvantage, we're talking about our second disadvantage here, is that the insulin can be produced slightly differently each time, so it may not suit everyone. Yeah. However, it is quicker and cheaper to treat diabetes. Plants can be inserted with herbicide resistance, so we're actually talking about a third advantage there. So they don't die when weeds are sprayed with herbicides. People are worried, so this is our third disadvantage, that the herbicide resistance will be picked up by weeds, creating new super weeds. A very detailed response. They've got 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages here. Not in a table, but if you look at how they've written this, they've posted an advantage, followed it up with a disadvantage. Advantage, disadvantage, advantage, disadvantage. Very good way to structure your response here. Okay, let's look at what the examiner said about this response. This is a good example of a level 3 response. We're talking about 5 or 6 marks. that covers several aspects of the indicative content shown on the mark scheme. This candidate has given a more than adequate number of valid advantages. Remember, we only needed 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. They've got 3. Beta carotene to reduce vitamin A deficiency, insulin production by bacteria, and herbicide resistance. The disadvantages are also very clear: development of allergies and the creation of superweeds. Little examiner tip at the bottom: it's a good idea to draw up a table showing the advantages and disadvantages of the use of GM organisms, like in the example that I showed you. You don't have to, it just makes it a little bit easier to do the comparative points. This ultimately would have scored 6 marks. Okay, thanks for watching.